the show.
Hi.
Okay, this image here was taken at the very first BOA. It was the
God.
first time of me seeing you as well. And I believe it was the first of its kind of promotion in Australia, professional Brazilian Jiu Jitsu at the famous Melbourne Town Hall. And prior to that, the Melbourne Town Hall was just used for professional boxing and professional Thai boxing.
That's right.
What do you remember from this particular event?
That's right.
Yourself being a purple belt, you have a young Craig next to you here. I remember when I was working on this event, even leading up to it, it was a very
He's so young.
It was a very interesting and hard sell to most of the fans because people didn't understand what they were paying for. We tried to explain to them, you're not paying $50 to watch an all-day grappling match with 6 other people on the mat. You're coming to an event. It's going to be a spectacle. What was it like for you to compete at an event like this and also the lead up to it?
Yeah, I think we actually just got back from living in Brazil back then. So we lived in Brazil for about 6 or 7 months.
Oh, wow.
And then we just returned, and I just know that it's very hard to actually find an advanced female matchup in Australia.
At that time
especially,
too.
That was probably, what, 5 years? Yeah, it was probably about 5 years
2014.
ago. So, I fought Kate Wilson, who was wow, 6 years ago nearly. Yeah, so I was fighting Kate Wilson, who was a brown belt at the time. And we've actually fought many, many times before, and she's still a very good friend of mine. And we always had extremely close matches where I actually lost every single one of them, I think. And it's always been a ref's decision or an advantage. But yeah, I don't know. This show was like really exciting. I can't remember if I was really nervous because I didn't know what to expect.
I don't think anyone knew what to expect.
I think it's very different. Like in Jiu-Jitsu, you generally, even at a world stage, you have 4 or 5 or 6 matches going on at the same time. And it's really nerve-wracking, but all eyes are not on you. Whereas this was a show is like, yes, you want to win, but you also want to put on a show, because no one, if you win a really boring match, no one remembers it and no one really values it. You have to actually entertain people,
Yeah.
So I just remember I really wanted to show what I can do. And once I stepped out there, with all the lights and the announcer, we don't get that, so we don't get professional announcers. Or now we do, but back then we didn't.
Yeah.
And it was really cool. All the audience just disappeared, and I was just actually in my element. So it was one of the most fun events, I think. I felt awesome, and it was just really, really fun to be there.
It's very interesting hearing your perspective, saying how all eyes were you, especially when that's your only match as well. And I suppose the same goes for the referees and judges, because most of them never had that much pressure on them. If they were to make a controversial call, it's on them at that moment. And, everyone's screaming at you, staring at you. So there's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to be a ref or a judge, to be honest. No, especially when I work for the board, and I get to see it from a very different perspective, not just a competitor. It's a really tough job. So, I'm glad I'm not doing that.
Now, I know you're a former gymnast and also a former high-level athlete. How does all your previous experience in athletic sports translate to professional competition?
It's an interesting question. Probably late. So firstly, I would say the ability to push myself and train really, really hard. Harshness of training and the coaching from a very young age was something pretty intense. From the age of 7 or 8, I was probably training 25 hours a week and competing all over Europe. And then when I started cycling, I was about 19. That was a whole, it was probably not as strict as gymnastics, but it was whole level of pushing yourself to the point where I would nearly vomit from the lactic acid buildup every training session. So physically, I got to know how to push myself.
Yeah.
What I really struggled with jiu-jitsu, it's you go from a sport that's completely individual, you're only in control of yourself, to bike riding or racing on the velodrome. It's not just yourself, but you're kind of fighting people, because sometimes at 60 k's an hour, you have to actually, cop an elbow or elbow someone out of the way, or you pose your way. And then you come to combat, where someone's trying to do something to you. So I think it actually, even though I think I'm a good competitor, or at least I think not my last 2 comps, but throughout my career, I do think that perhaps I've overperformed to what my actual abilities are. And I think that's because I've been competing from a very young age, and I've been working with a sports psychologist and so on. So I think just being able to focus and know that I've done it before and I've been there before, and I actually like lie to myself enough that I thrive on the pressure, that I try to like believe it. So
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest thing, like being able to work really hard and knowing how hard I can push myself, being able to be really disciplined for a very long time, and kind of know that you always win and lose as well. I think that helps you improve. But the skill wise, you know, obviously flexibility does help in jiu-jitsu and strength and coordination, but I think no matter how flexible you are, you still have to learn the skills. So it's not, I'm not sure it translates as much as people might think.
Well, personally, I've worked alongside many athletes, and you've always intrigued me because of your competitive background in professional sports. And a lot of professional jiu-jitsu fighters, oftentimes that is their only sport. A lot of them would have started their first taste of competition at the Pan Pacs, and that's a very casual event. And then having to compete against someone like you, I mean, yourself, you got so much edge on you. I would imagine that would be such a psychological advantage for yourself.
I think so. I mean, maybe nowadays, but I mean, I also started at Pan Pacs at white and blue belt. So, you know, I was walking around and stalking every girl's achievements, and then I was just scared of everyone. Now I think in Australia, I don't know, I guess I do have the advantage of kind of going like, I've done this before, I know what to do. People might, you know, think something of me, but at the same time, and I took this advice from world champion Luisa Monteiro, I actually don't really enjoy competing in Australia because everyone just kind of expects you to win, and there's a lot more local pressure. Yeah. I remember, I think last year, 2 years before, I competed at Pan Pacs against Anna Schmidt, who's actually a black belt world champion, and I did pretty well. I think I lost by 2 points, and I definitely felt like I could have beaten her, but I didn't. And everyone, like, they just didn't know who she was, and everyone was, oh, are you really upset, you know? And we never see you lose. And I'm like, you know, like that's the perception. And I'm like, A, Anna is the world champion, and B, like I lose all the time. People just don't tend to remember it. There's a different kind of pressure on. I kind of nearly preferred being the underdog because you kind of have nothing to lose. But what I've changed my mindset to lately, especially last Pan Pacs, was and this was, you know, on encouragement of Louisa, because I was like, oh, you're fighting your friends, you know, we've all been black belts and we've come up through the ranks together. And because there's not many women that are that level in Australia, we're all kind of friends. We have trained together at some time, and it's hard to separate that and actually try to really beat someone. Yeah. And also, like, you know, not to scare them off from the first Pan Pacs at black or anything like that. But what Louisa said to me was like, you know, like, you're the boss. The second you underestimate somebody, like for a split second, they'll beat you, or they might. Everyone is good. So you can't just go, oh, I'll just go light and take it easy, because you will get beat. So I sort of had a mindset of, it wasn't super enjoyable, but to kind of go like, I'm going in all out and I'm going to win this, or try to anyway. Yeah. Otherwise, like, you can very quickly lose. Anyone can beat anyone at any one time. You know?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Now, shortly after this photo was taken, walking out under the bright lights, and our very own John Domicoli, our fight MC, calling out your name, and in the style of a professional fight night. How memorable was this moment for you?
It was actually awesome. The pretty much the one thing I remember from it is he was staring right at my face and read out some of my achievements. And I think I think that year or the year before Worlds, I won blue belt Worlds, and then 2 months later I won purple belt Worlds. And he, like, having someone say it out loud, I was like, that's not me, you know, it sounds way better than I actually feel. So that was like a very surreal experience, and it got me really, really pumped. Yeah.
And it's pretty cool too. At the very first bowl, I remember it was almost a struggle to find high-level female competitors that was evenly matched up to put on a show. The game's changed so much now.
Yeah, yes and no. I mean, like, to be honest, it's still really hard to find someone relatively matched in Australia. Like, there's probably, and it keeps coming back to, like, you know, I train with Hope Douglas a lot, and she's not my weight class, but she's also my training partner and a really good friend. And we'll never fight each other, you know, like, unless like we both get paid a lot of money,
Yeah.
but just takes away from training. And besides that, like Kate Wilson will probably be always a great opponent for me, but she's had a baby and she probably hasn't been training as much in the last year or so. And there's some up and coming girls, but the girls I'm really interested to fight now are like the top sort of 5 black belts in the world. It is still hard in Australia right now. I think in about 5 years' time, it will definitely change with the crop of like even blue belts now. The scene is changing, and I'm
definitely.
glad that I'll probably be too old in 5 years' time.
There's always a female masters division.
yeah, there is, but it's definitely it'll just be so much more professional. The kids are starting to. At 16, some of them are absolutely incredible. So, it'll be a different sport.
Now, you were an up-and-coming purple belt at 2014. Flash forward 5 years later to the last bowler, competing as a black belt, coming out to the crowd. And by now, you and Lachlan's obviously made a name for yourself, competing around the world. You've had a massive following internationally and locally. What was it like walking out this time as a black belt, having a lot more support behind you, having all that experience behind you?
Probably quite different. I definitely, I'm a lot more confident, a lot more chilled out. Like, it's not to say I don't get nervous, because I do, and especially at events, you need to put on a show, but between BOA and then I've done things like Copper Podio, EBI, I've competed at some really big stages. This was really cool because usually when I travel by myself, and you have no corner, no coach, and it gets a little bit lonely, and you have to rely on yourself. And at this BOA, actually, we had all the like Absolute crew sitting there and cheering, we had Lockie, actually someone coaching me in the corner. And so it was really fun. And also because I've done BOA before, sitting on the board as well and being to like size events are just incredibly well done. So I knew it was going to be just a good show and a very professional show.
Yeah.
And probably one of the reasons why I actually agreed to it, because Tegan stepped up and she was already there with a partner who was competing, Bobby. She was already there. And the reason why I agreed to it, because I got personally probably a little bit annoyed that there's just generally probably all over the world, just not much effort into putting women on the fights or having women as title fights, and it's definitely not about myself even, but a lot of the women do have equal achievements to the main cards of the men, or equal to the second or third on the main card, but we never get put anywhere near the top of the card. And it's just something like, all right, I'll step up again and I'll try to put on a show and represent the women, because we do have a lot to offer, and I think it's really good to highlight that.
It was a really good match to watch as well, and I hope to see a lot more bowlers in the future.
Oh, it was great. I know. I do wish for BOA to happen again, because it is good for the local community.
Yeah. I also heard that you were helping out with the matchmaking with the last bowl before this. What was it like being a matchmaker for super fights?
Look, it's the competitor scene isn't massive in Australia. So I think just being around the sport for a long time, I kind of know, especially with the women, some guys as well. But I guess I know people with similar abilities.
Were you thinking stylistically what would make a nice match for the audience?
Yeah, that as well. If you're lucky enough to have that choice, because sometimes you just can't be too picky. But of course, like sometimes you have the two best fighters and absolutely nothing happens because they just cancel each other out. Yeah, so it's usually like a good matchup will be opposing styles, or like the like submission hunter against the control kind of points person. And one person might have probably better jiu-jitsu and the other person might have like this amazing subs from nowhere. So that kind of makes it really exciting. So when we do have enough people and enough styles and the same kind of weight categories and the same belts, it can make some really exciting matches.
Yeah, I can't wait for that scene. And also working from the first bowler to this current bowler, the change in competition has just been amazing. And also people became more familiar with high-level professional jiu-jitsu competition, whereas years ago, people not understanding what their paying to watch. But now when you think of a pro fight night, they're like, okay, yeah, I know what's going on.
I agree. And I think like definitely, you know, like Sai and Boa in Australia have been instrumental to that. There've been a lot of other events popping up, you know, and then also having access to like UFC Fight Pass and Flow Grappling, and having things like, you know, like EBI. We were kind of watching it back in the day when it was like EBI 1 or 2 and going like, wow, that's like people are getting paid to do this. And then Lockie and Craig were on it, and things like Copa Podio, same thing. That was, you know, one of the first professional jiu-jitsu events, and then to have some Australians on it was just like a dream. Whereas now, you know, there's like Polaris and Grapple Fest and all these really cool events like Kasai popping up, and it's quite common to have an Aussie or like at least an Absolute person on pretty much any one of them. So
well, at the moment, I think if you think of any Aussie, it's pretty much Absolute.
Yeah, in the Nogi scene, we're pretty well with that.
Such an exciting scene. Speaking of Absolute, having started jiu-jitsu not long ago and then moving to running your own gym with your now husband, what's it like having a husband as a training partner, working with him and running a class?
It's pretty awesome. I mean, he's been stuck with me in isolation. We don't usually train together a lot. Before comps, if he's also not prepping for a comp, he definitely steps up and helps me out a little bit and pretends to be a small girl. And you know, but we are. I mean, he's a lightweight, like he's a 78, 77 kilo male who's pretty like strong and stumpy for his size.
Yeah.
And I'm like a light feather female. So we're not each other's best training partners. He has to go extremely light, not to hurt me, which changes the jiu-jitsu so much. It's not really realistic. Before ADCC especially, like because I've got really small feet, we could actually work a lot from these leg entanglement positions that you see here.
Yeah.
And I think like once he can catch my foot, because it's so small, it definitely makes the larger feet a little bit easier.
So that's
probably
point,
one area. Yeah, that's probably one area that I can be a little bit useful to him.
Having small feet.
Yeah, having small feet, and I can point them. That's one thing from gymnastics days. I've got flexible feet. But yeah, look, we actually met when we were both physiotherapists for working for a footy club. So we worked. We learned how to work together really early on and how to maintain that sort of professional relationship. So that has never been a problem. I know some couples struggle with it, and because it is a change of roles and change of dynamic in your relationship. You're no longer husband and wife. You're, you know, your colleagues, or he's a coach and I'm a student. I think as a coach, I probably struggled with it a little bit when I was like a fresh blue belt. And I think it took me a little while to work out, you know, when I'm being a girlfriend at the time and when I'm being a student and when he's being my coach. And you kind of talk to each other a little bit differently too, you know, like I would get annoyed because Lockie would just like roll his eyes or do something that he wouldn't necessarily do in a class to a student. But then I was behaving like probably a little bitch as well. So it took me a little while to realize that, you know, he's giving up his time to help me, and I need to respect that. And I think we do really, really well. Like, of course, from time to time we'll get annoyed, you know, like if he's going too hard or I'm going a bit crazy and trying to actually hurt him for going too hard on me.
Yeah.
But I think in all, Lockie is an extremely good coach and he's a very patient and kind teacher. So that really helped. I think we're lucky also, like an Absolute, you know, I've got so many women to train with and they are beasts and they're so good. So it doesn't really make much sense to, you know, train with the 80 kilo men that have to go super easy on me when I have a whole team of like incredible women that are, you know, like right on my toes and pushing me in every way. Yeah.
I think that's a great thing, Absolute, right now, having a large range of high-level females to train with too. Having my partner that trains Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, hearing her frustrations, I didn't really get that before meeting her. I just thought that, you know, a girl, she'll be okay. She trains with boys, she'll get tough, but you learn more and more that it's not always about being tough every day. Sometimes you do need someone your own level to work with. And like I said, when Lockie has to lower his strength, it's not really beneficial to anyone.
No, and it's Actually, it's interesting. I mean, like, don't get me wrong, training with boys makes you tough. And some of
Yep.
the men are my favorite training partners, but it's never the same. I don't think unless it's like a new white belt, I don't think many men go 100%, even subconsciously,
Yep.
and it does change things. So sometimes, of course, like to be a good training partner with Lockie's rolling with me, if I do something really well, he might not fight it 100%. He might let me have it. Whereas sometimes you go and spar with a female and you're like, oh, it doesn't work, because they fight back. So it's just a different feel. The other thing that's very different is flexibility and the game we play. Like what might work on a guy won't necessarily work on a rooster weight girl because of the flexibility and the movement. I think for about 8 years, I was like, I'm tough. I can handle everything. I'll roll with the 90-kilo guy. I don't care. And now I just say no, and I don't really care because it's about myself.
Longevity
like,
as well.
Even if they're not trying to, and no one is trying to hurt me. No one's trying to be bad training partner. But all it takes is a slip on the mat, and I'll hurt my rib, and then I can't train for a month. It's been tough doing massive seminar tours because everyone wants to roll at the end.
Yep.
And I generally just ask for the really small guys and the women to roll with me. And sometimes there aren't any. And a few times I've had to be like, tell people to stop because they're hurting me.
Yeah.
I used to care and I don't anymore.
Speaking earlier, how you said you oftentimes would go out and have no corner and sometimes have corners. What's it like to be the cornerman for Lockie at his events?
I'm such a creepo. Creeping from the back. Look, I think Lockie doesn't need a corner. He certainly doesn't need a corner, and he certainly doesn't need technical instruction, nothing like that. But I think just having someone there for you and having someone to, sometimes you might be down by an advantage with a minute to go and you just need someone to like yell at you to go or to just say, stay calm, you're doing really good. Sometimes it can actually influence the judges too.
Right.
Like if you keep going, like it's all you, it's all, I don't know if it does, but it's like subconsciously they might be like, oh yeah, he's working really hard when it's looking like a decision.
Yep.
But so I feel definitely out of my depth giving Lockie any sort of technical advice, but definitely giving time and telling someone to lift the pace a little bit is just that little bit of encouragement that might help to spur them along. For me, I'm learning pretty hard not to hear just technical advice. Actually, this is I'm going to go back to BOA because that's a pretty funny story. So in Jiu Jitsu, you get an advantage for like a near pass, or you have to stabilize a position for 3 seconds, and I would stabilize 2.5. So I think I had like 2 or 3 near passes. I had like a near sweep, and I had a near back take twice, I think. So Kate got 2 points at the start for tapping my shin as a pulled guard. That's counted as a takedown in Jiu Jitsu. And then I had nearly all these things, and there was a chair. One of the refs' chairs was right in front of the scoreboard, and I couldn't quite see the scoreboard. So with like 20 seconds to go, I actually thought I had 4 points for the back take or 3 points for the pass. I can't remember. And I was like, oh, I'm sweet. I got the points for one of the passes, and I had like 3 advantages on top of that. So I was like, I think on Turtle on Kate with like 20 seconds to go, and Lockie was screaming like, go, go, go. And all I heard in my head was, no, no, no. Like, I said, relax, do nothing, you've won. Okay. Yeah. And it cost me, well, I don't know that I would have taken her back, but I just chilled. I was like, okay, I've got this. Like, it looks like 3 points. He's screaming, no, just relax. And periods of time in my career where I heard whatever I want to hear and not what Lockie's actually saying. So yeah, that's something I'm working on.
That's very interesting. And also got to rewatch that BOA fight as well. Now I'm very curious to watch.
I fought really well and I didn't win that one, but I had all these near things that didn't quite happen. And yeah, I was just convinced I had the points and I was it. So it is, you do have to sort of trust yourself and know what you feeling as well. Sometimes what the corner sees is not what you feel. Yeah. And if you do whatever they're saying, it might not be the right thing. So I think it's really important to be able to trust yourself and know what your body's doing and not just relying on the corner. Yeah.
I think that's going to be really useful advice to a lot of up-and-comers listening to it as well.
It's hard to do when you're a white belt. Sometimes you just need to step someone through.
This photo was taken not long after you started working on the combat sports board, working ringside. What was it like on your first show? How did that change your perspective of combat sports or just martial arts in general?
Changed it completely. So I've watched MMA and I've always had some sort of idea about MMA. I wouldn't call myself an expert by any means. I've never done any striking myself. So my first show was actually Sai shows, and that was a Muay Thai show. And that was kind of like, I was appointed, but I haven't signed all the documents yet. So it was more like as a trainee. Just like understanding the scoring and the especially with Muay Thai and boxing, it's something I'm still learning. Understanding different styles and understanding you know, what you might think that of like any other person, you think something looks like it's causing damage, and actually understanding the sport and knowing what's causing damage and what isn't. That's something I'm learning, especially with boxing, because I've never been hit in the head. With MMA, I mean, I don't know. Like the more I watch it, the more I go, like it's just brutal. And I'm always very conscious of my face being very animated when someone's getting knocked out and and so on. But I guess the experience I bring is more from the grappling side, to especially in MMA. A lot of the board members are more striking based, Muay Thai and boxing. So, you know, just knowing someone was close to a submission or not, I think that's probably what people don't understand the most. But look, even going to recently, I did the MMA judging course and working on the UFC, and just knowing exactly what the refs and the judges are looking for. It's completely changed my, like, even with takedowns and being dominating on the ground, you know, like it's completely different to what I thought. So when the refs cop abuse now, and of course from time to time, I'm sure the refs are wrong, but or the judges, but sorry, the judges, I mean, it's very different when you're A, up close, and B, when you actually know the rules. And the rules are often exactly opposite to what people think, because they haven't actually bothered to read them, or they haven't done the judging course, you know, and it's really complex. And I think it really requires a very deep understanding of the sport, and I'm still learning in all three sports.
But that comes down to what we said earlier about when you're under the lights, some people, I wouldn't say crack under pressure, but they could also really feel people screaming at them, the time's going. There's a lot of pressure on them to make a quick decision, and sometimes they might just get swayed by the crowd.
For sure. And, you know, sometimes the crowd is, I think it's not too bad. Definitely some, you know, might be an area of Melbourne that
we won't name names,
but no, we won't name any names. But sometimes you get people, especially later in the night when they've had a bit to drink. It's not very nice, and I know it can be destructive. And you hear everything when you're, you know, I haven't been in the cage obviously, but you do hear stuff, and it can make or break you a little bit. And I think you learn just to keep your focus. Yeah, some people, you know, it's even having been really nervous, you know, you can have the sharpest brain and everything goes right and you just get clipped, and that all goes, you know, you get clipped in the head once, or you get a mini concussion or something, and you don't know where you are, what's happening. You don't make quick decisions or the right decisions, and it changes the fight completely. So I think that's probably the biggest influence is that.
I tell everybody with these kind of photos, with finishing TKO photos, I never just focus on the person being knocked out. I don't think that's respectful. Also, that's coming from me as a martial artist. I'm always trying to show context of what's happened, showing the person who won walking away from the scene. And I believe this was another one of those cases where it was a clipped KO. The person got finished by TKO. And I'm always interested in seeing the faces around the ring or cage at the time, because obviously you see the more seasoned veterans, but then some of the new faces, they're thinking, oh crap, what's going on? And you look a bit,
happening?
You look a bit confused there.
I mean, look, it's never nice to see, for me anyway. I don't want to see anyone KO'd. And there's been, like, it's a dangerous sport, you know. The aim is to kind of hurt someone as much as possible, punch them in the head, in the brain as much as possible. So for me, coming from a medical background as well, a physio background, and dealing with concussions, especially in football, like most people are fine. People need to be looked after. And when the fights are stopped and the ref decides that the person had enough, they're probably right, you know. So
Yeah.
to me, like, it's no amount of money is worth your brain or your life, like no amount of money. So I know it's a hard pill to swallow when the fight gets stopped a little bit early, but I think it's for the better. Yeah.
Very well said.
A hard one though.
And it's also hard because
Yeah.
a lot of the people fighting novice MMA, amateur MMA, oftentimes they're training just as hard, or if not as hard as the professional, earning the top tier money, and they're wearing the same amount of punishment as well.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, you know, if I was 18 again and crazy, I reckon I probably would have done MMA, because I think, like, I've got the personality for it. But yeah, I definitely, I know to get good at striking, I would have to cop so many punches in the head that I'm definitely not into it. Yeah.
Speaking of copping punches into head, what was it like attending your first Thai boxing show, Rebellion?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly just said, yeah, that was probably one of my first ones.
Speaking of people ringside, I'm surprised that Simone, as a boxer herself,
yeah, you know what?
To a show.
I think that was my first show, and she just came back from some sort of awards night.
Yeah.
She was actually representing the board of Boxing Victoria, something like that, at some awards night. And she came in halfway through the show because she literally does everything. And I remember that night, I was like, what do I do? How do I need to prepare? And they just say, just don't wear white because you're going to get blood all over you. And I was like, what? What do you mean? And by the end of the night, I was like, oh, right, I have to cover my food. I have to cover my drinks. I have to cover everything and hide under the cloth when,
and you're very close up
Thai,
too.
When elbows are allowed. So it's like sweat and blood sometimes, and it just sprays on you. It's, I don't know how I'm going to feel about this after COVID. It's definitely when we're allowed back again. It's
speaking of which, this is my first time doing this. I have to actually go back to this photo because I'm a germaphobe myself, even before the whole COVID thing. And being to many shows, I'm always carrying a hand sanitizer with me in my bag, in my car. What do you think about the mats at the moment? Because obviously coming from a BJJ gym, no shoes on the mats, don't go to the bathroom bare feet because you don't want any of that bacteria onto the mats. But you think about the canvas with shoes on, going to the bathroom, coming back, people walking backstage into the canvas. Oftentimes it's not clean. By the time you get to the 10th fight, it's so dirty, full of sweat, full of bacteria, and you get people rolling on that. They have a cut. If something opens up, imagine all the things that goes into that. As a health professional,
it's lovely.
What do you think? I can't even comprehend that.
Yeah, look, it does sound a little bit gross. I mean, the good thing is, like, everyone has all the health checks and they do get blood tests. So there's definitely no bloodborne diseases being carried through. I guess the biggest risk would be something like, a staph infection of just from the bacteria, or just any kind of like bacteria that would live on the mat. I haven't actually heard of any infections happening from MMA fights. I think what happens is, I mean, obviously there's a ringside position, and what happens is straight after the fight, you actually get cleaned up. All your wounds get looked at pretty quickly. You get either stitched up or sent to hospital, but usually there's showers available, and most people will, at least have their cuts and so on dressed, and they'll shower relatively quickly. So it's a hard one because the announcer does have to come in and out of the ring, and they are wearing shoes. Probably the one good thing is that not every fight goes to the ground. So like definitely in boxing and Muay Thai, it doesn't matter as much because they're not on the ground. MMA is a little bit different, but I guess it's not as bad as grappling where we're pretty much just on the ground. I know when there's a lot of blood or sweat, they definitely wipe the canvas in between, but they don't disinfect it.
It's just a towel.
It's a towel. So, I mean, ideally you would, disinfect it between every round, but he just couldn't do it just because it's, by the time it dries, it's way too, it will take half an hour between each round. So it's not practical.
Yeah.
But yeah, as far as I know, I don't think there has been any incidents like that. So hopefully, fingers crossed, it won't repeat. Yeah.
Actually, the one thing I enjoy about shooting behind a cage is the fence is that it protects people from falling on me, which has happened before. Being ringside, you're so much more closer, a lot more. You're a lot more exposed. On this night, there was another bloody fight that was happening between Toby Smith and Jakub, and that was when there was a lot of blood splashing.
That was a great fight. Yeah.
You remember that one?
I do remember that one. Yeah.
And you guys were so close to where the blood was splattering.
Yeah. I got a bit of blood. You get home, and sometimes we get home, and you're the same 1 or 2 in the morning, and I was like, oh, I just need to shower just because of the blood on you. But again, it's like, it just feels a bit yuck, but the guys are all tested, and no one would be allowed to actually fight any nasties with them. Yeah, sometimes I do get a bit scared, someone falling on me, and you're having to have to catch them. But again, no incident has happened yet, so
there'll be plenty more.
I like to protect my food.
Yeah.
Oh dear, first world problems.
Yeah. Well, Livia, thank you so much for being on. It was a pleasure hearing your thoughts on combat sports and Brazilian Jiu Jitsu.
Thanks so much. And thanks for all the photos throughout the years. It's actually really cool to have a look through all of this and be like, oh my, it just brings up all the memories, and all that. So yeah, it's amazing. And you're doing such an awesome job in the community.
It's been a fun journey. I'm always thinking a lot about my photographs, and I know everybody's got a story as well. So it's nice to hear yours too.
Yeah, thanks for having me. That was really cool.